technical difficulties yesterday. I really appreciate you guys working with us to make this work. So with that being said, Commissioner Wallace, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, Ms. Scorby. Could you please take the roll?
Chairman Drew.
Here.
Vice Chairman Wallace.
Here.
Commissioner Bliss.
Here.
Commissioner Hubbs.
Here.
Commissioner Johnston.
Here.
Commissioner McNinch.
Here.
Commissioner Morai.
Here.
Commissioner Valentine.
Here.
And Commissioner Young.
All right. County Advisory Board members down here in Vegas, if you could please rise and let us know your name and who you're representing today.
Paul Dixon Clark.
Mary Allen Humble. Sean Shea Washout. Gil Guiar Carson.
Bunch Mineral.
Bear White Pine.
Joe Crim Pershing.
Lori Laughlin.
House Douglas.
All right, thank you. So by my count, we have Clark, Humboldt, Washoe, Churchill, Mineral, White Pine, Pershing, Lincoln, and Douglas. Thank you, gentlemen. With that, we'll close item number 12, open item 13, approval of the agenda. Chairman Drew, for possible action, the commission will review the agenda and may take action to approve the agenda. The commission may remove items from the agenda, continue items for consideration, or take items out of order. Are there any comments or questions on the agenda for today? Okay, seeing none, is there any public or county advisory board comment in Las Vegas? Do we have any comment in Reno on item 13, approval of the agenda?
No comment in Reno.
I was wondering, they were reading.
Okay, thank you. And Elko? Is there public comment in Elko?
No comment.
Okay, and please let me know if someone arrives so that I know to check in on you. Otherwise, I will not do that.
I'm sorry, I had to walk all the way to the front door because I heard the door opening. So I walked away from the conference room. That is what I have to do to see if someone comes in.
Okay, just advise us if someone arrives. Thank you.
Oh, all right, thank you.
With that, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there any question or discussion on agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Wallace, a second by Commissioner McNinch to approve the agenda as presented for today. Is there any question or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 9-0. We'll close item 13 and move to item 14, Hunter Education Instructor Southern Region Award Presentation. Conservation Educator 3, Martin Olson. Southern Region Hunt Education Instructor Floyd Coons will be recognized for 30 years of dedicated service as a certified volunteer hunter education instructor. Mr. Olson. Mr. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to just say a few things before we turn it over to Martin. Generally, just about the volunteer program and also about the hunter education instructors, and that volunteers are really the lifeblood of our agency. We're currently in the process of developing a press release, and in that process we've looked at the in-kind match that volunteer service provides and then the federal dollars that allows us to claim. We're looking at $2.5 million annually as a result of volunteer service. And what you're going to hear about today regarding Floyd Coons' service as a hunter education instructor is really the key part of that volunteer effort and the volunteer effort that we rely so heavily on for so much of our education responsibilities. And I just personally want to thank Mr. Coons and make everybody aware of the importance of volunteers to the function of the department and specifically our education programs. And with that, I'll turn it over to Martin.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. My name is Martin Olson. I am the Southern Region Hunter Education Coordinator for the Nevada Department of Wildlife. And as Tony mentioned there, in the early days of hunter education, our class consisted of 16 hours. And a lot of our instructors who volunteer for this, they're working a normal 40-hour work week. And then they would come in primarily on the weekend and volunteer for 8 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday, and then go back to work on Monday again. So in the early days prior to 2000, it was really a lot of opportunity, a lot of work for our volunteers. After 2000, we did change the program where 8 hours of that class is a home study. And so now the class is just really a one-day, 8-hour class on the weekend. Or 3.5 hours if you have a night class on a Monday, Tuesday, or during the work week. So our volunteers really put a lot of effort into this, and it did take a lot of time away from their home body, and we greatly appreciate that. Mr. Floyd Coons became a Nevada hunter education instructor in 1985. Prior to moving to Nevada, he was a hunter education instructor in Washington. He instructed a total of 78 classes, which basically encompassed about 1,400 students over this time. He's also recently, in 2011, we had the opportunity to create some shooting sports classes with the shooting range that was developed here in Clark County. And since then, we've had a beginning rifle class, a beginning muzzleloader class, and a beginning shotgun class. And these classes are very much beginner opportunities for people who have never fired a firearm and got the opportunity to do so through the Department of Wildlife and our volunteer instructors. Total there is about 150 students since then. And those classes are not mandatory like the hunter education. It's just an opportunity for the community to get a chance to fire those weapons. So with 30 years of instructing, and that's what Floyd has got at the end of 2015, he received a muzzleloader, a 50 caliber muzzleloader, and it was very gracious to the Northern Nevada Safari Club International, who recognized the importance of his service and through their funding purchased this firearm and donated it to him with his name engraved on it and the statement of a 30-year hunter education instructor. So, Mr. Floyd Coons.
Thank you for being me.
Mr. Coons, you're welcome to say a few words if you'd like.
Do you want to say anything?
No, I'm trying to hold my breath.
Don't do that. We don't want to pass out.
That's enough.
That's pretty good. Huh?
Thank you, Floyd. Tony?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I like Mr. Coons' style. He's a man of few words and a lot of action, and that speaks highly to our volunteers. And we talked a lot yesterday about sportsman ethics and things of that nature, but it all starts with our volunteers and our hunter ed and setting those expectations early in life. I can still remember the lessons that my hunter ed instructors instilled in me, and I can't thank you enough for all your dedication, service, and volunteerism, in the state of Nevada thanks you. So thank you. With that, we'll close item number 13, actually 14, and we'll move to item 15, member items, announcements, and correspondence. Informational, commissioners may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. The commission will review and may discuss correspondence sent or received by the commission since the last regular meeting and may provide copies for the exhibit file. Correspondence sent or received by Secretary Wasley may also be discussed. I'll open this up with just a couple of housekeeping items. One, because we are on the teleconference feed, just remember, whether you're up here on the commission or guest presenters, to speak into the microphone so everyone can hear you clearly. Again, thank you to staff for manning the 2 locations, especially today. I understand it's pretty snowy up north, so I won't mention that it's sunny and 70 in Las Vegas today. I think we did run low on agendas. Director Wasley has mentioned to me that we're making copies, so if someone needs an agenda, there should be new copies out front shortly. And then just to address one comment that was made yesterday, and I'm not going to belabor this much, but just to touch on it, I think there was a comment questioning the commitment of some of the members of this commission. And I will tell everyone in this audience that you can question a lot of things that we do, and you can be unfavorable to the decisions we make and what ends up on this agenda. But the one thing that you cannot question about the 8 other members on this board is their commitment to this state, its people, and its wildlife. And that's all I'm going to say about that. With that, does anyone else have correspondence or member items? Director Wasley? Okay. We'll close item 15 and move to item 16, County Advisory Boards to manage wildlife member items. This is informational. CAB members may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any items requiring commission action will be scheduled on a future commission agenda. County Advisory Boards, any items for us today? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close item 16 and we'll open item 17, Nevada Department of Wildlife project updates, informational. The commission has requested that the department provide regular project updates for ongoing projects and programs as appropriate based on geography and timing of the meetings. These updates are intended to provide additional detail in addition to the summaries provided as part of the regular department report and are intended to educate the commission and public as to the department's ongoing duties and responsibilities. Mr. Wasley, would you like to introduce our presentation for today?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So consistent with recent trends, the department really wants to be able to take advantage of this venue, these meetings, to update the commission, the CAB members, and interested publics in some of the ongoing efforts of the Department of Wildlife around the state. Traditionally, what we've done is try to take advantage of some of the specific geography of the meeting location to bring in some of our staff to speak to you about some of the ongoing projects, some of the research. We discussed having a law enforcement case overview at our recent meeting, but because of the freshness, the newness of some of the cases, we thought we would postpone that. And so today, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed is going to take us through just a few of the high-profile wildlife cases and some of the unfortunate fatal boat accidents that have taken considerable time, energy, and effort of our law enforcement staff. But I think that this is a great opportunity for the commission and county advisory board members and interested public to hear some of what we do that lands well beyond the confines of these meetings. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed.
Thank you, Director Wasley and Chairman Drew. As Director Wasley said, I just wanted to give a little bit of a sampling of some of the cases we worked on over the last year. Some of the bigger ones that happened in October and November aren't wrapped up yet, so we'll have to wait a while on those. But and you know, certainly it's just a sample. You know, we've got 31 field wardens statewide, and plus that's 31 at the field level, plus 3 regional supervisors and 3 staff level captains positions, and myself at the chief's level. And so with that many people statewide, we're constantly working on various cases, whether it be the simplest misdemeanor fishing without a license on up to felony big game poaching. You know, we work a lot of the boating safety stuff. We're essentially a highway patrolman in a boat for some of the year on different waterways. That part of the job's been a little slower in the north these last few years, but still going strong down here. So I wanted to just touch on a few of these and show you a sample of what we do and who we are and how we do it, so that you guys can you know, think about that when you're out and about. Apparently my remote isn't working. That was operator error. So our our citation numbers haven't been fully entered for the last quarter of the calendar year yet, so I just went with the fiscal year on this number. But we track our statistics just to see what each year looks like from one to the next. In fiscal year 15, we issued 853 misdemeanor citations and gave out about 3,006 warnings. Those numbers are down quite a bit over recent years, and there are several factors to look to for why those numbers are down. On the bigger scale cases, I sort of tracked those by looking at how many case numbers we drew. It was 286 this last year in the calendar year. That's down from maybe 350 or 375 in prior years. Again, several factors that we could look at for why those numbers are down, but we won't go over that. Those case numbers that we would draw, that would be, you know, if you're going to draw and assign or get a case number assigned for any sort of bigger investigation, whether it be a felony poaching or a boat accident, you know, any sort of incident that needs a tracking number associated with it. So we'll look at a brief sample. As I said, a lot of the cases that we had from this past hunting season are still in the process, you know, going through the justice system wheels. So a lot of those we can't present yet, but everything we'll look at here today have been all these have been fully adjudicated. We publicized 4 big wildlife cases in the media this year. We use the media to our advantage as best we can. Number one, to celebrate our successes when we do make a case that we think the public needs to know about, because I think there's a big deterrent factor in showing those cases in the media when someone gets caught doing something that they shouldn't be, and we get a good conviction on it. The other thing we use the media releases for is when we've got a case where we have a few pieces of the puzzle, but we need to put the last couple pieces together, and we might need a little bit more information from somebody in the public that may have them. So I'll go over sort of 4 cases that we publicized highly this year, and then switch gears a little bit to the boating end of things. As I said, our job's very seasonal, and one month your job may be completely different from the next month, and in one part of the state the job is completely different from another part of the state. So along those lines, this year we had 5 boating accidents that ended up with a fatal casualty on the Nevada side of our waters, and then we investigated 4 more on the Arizona side of the waters. I'll go over that later, but down here on Lake Mead and Colorado River, it's concurrent jurisdiction with us in Arizona, so we end up working accidents on the Arizona side. One of the bigger cases we had in the media was a White Pine County case. We have an excellent district attorney in White Pine County that loves wildlife, loves our cases, and he sends a message that if you're going to commit wildlife crime, don't do it in White Pine County. This particular case was an Ely man who's since moved to Carlin, but he pled guilty November 18th to killing a really big trophy mule deer in Great Basin National Park. Of course, the national park is completely closed to hunting, and therefore has some big trophy animals, and it becomes tempting to see those animals in there just inside the boundary. As are many of our cases, this case was reported by an eyewitness who took some excellent notes, called us right away. We were actually able to get a warden out into the field at the time, which sometimes is rare because a lot of times these calls come in and a warden may be 3 hours away. But in this case, the Ely game warden, Scott Giles, was able to respond from home and actually intercept this vehicle coming in from the field with the deer in the back of the truck. We rely very heavily on that program, Operation Game Thief, we call it. Operation Game Thief is essentially secret witness for wildlife crimes. As you people know, you can call in. It's 1-800-992-3030. You can remain completely anonymous if you like. We've got dispatchers there generally from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. every night that'll answer that line, and then in the off hours you can leave a message. But that program works very well for us. We get a lot of calls that come into that, and with as few game wardens as we have and as many square miles as we have to cover, we rely very heavily on the citizens to call in when they see something that's amiss. Obviously, the wildlife belongs to the people of Nevada, and we appreciate the fact that people will call in when they see that wildlife being taken from them. This is a picture of that buck. This was, I believe, a photo that we pulled from publicly available social media. As you can see, it's what I would consider a buck of a lifetime, mid-30s inches on spread, and some extra points. But so it was a case that got some attention, especially in the Ely area where people were familiar with it. This gentleman, as I said, got some good penalties in White Pine County. He was fined more than $9,000. $8,000 of that was civil penalty that comes back to the state, and then a $1,000 donation to Operation Game Thief as part of their support of the program. Like I said, they give out reward money, and so a lot of our cases, when we're reaching a plea deal in court, sometimes we'll work that in a donation to Operation Game Thief. He got 3 years probation and then a year of jail time that's suspended, so if he stays out of trouble for that 3 years of probation, he won't have to serve the jail time. Forfeited the rifle and some of the optics used in it, and then lost all of his hunting, fishing, and trapping license privileges for 5 years. Next case, this is kind of an interesting one, not as glorious as far as a big trophy animal, not as glorious on the big fines, but an interesting case in which, again, a couple citizens called in and reported some people that shot a doe in a hayfield near Ely, and got to looking at their hunt book and realized that there was not an antlerless hunt in that unit. So gave us a call. We followed it up as we could a couple days later, met up, reached out to them. They agreed to meet with our investigators and discuss the case here in Vegas when they got back home to Henderson, but then sort of disappeared on us, failed to show up to meet with our investigators, moved, changed addresses, changed phone numbers, everything sort of went cold, and we had it on the back burner for a while. About a year later, we had a checkpoint set up. We hadn't done a checkpoint in quite a few years, but we decided to try that again, had a little checkpoint set up on the south end of Ruby Valley coming out towards Highway 50, and the Ely game warden, Scott Giles, who had been involved in the case at the initial go-around, actually recognized these guys as they pulled up and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you." We were able to close the case on that. The wildlife case had sort of passed on us a little bit, but they were convicted of obstruction and hindering a game warden. The fines weren't impressive, but the key thing about that hindering a game warden charge is it carries 12 demerits on our demerit scale, and so they were revoked for 3 years, all their license privileges. Next one got a lot of media coverage. This was an antelope case from 2014, in which a couple out-of-state guys were living in a motel in Battle Mountain, putting in cell phone towers, and sort of just for a thrill kill, shot this antelope down south of Battle Mountain on Highway 305. This was in April. Because of the timing of the year, it could be assumed that the doe was pregnant, probably late stages of pregnancy. We tried to convince the prosecutors in that case to go after 2 different charges, and we couldn't quite get that one on for a doe and a fawn fetus. But we were able to make the case. It was kind of interesting. The police department there was actually called initially because of a strong odor of marijuana coming from the motel room, and when cops showed up, they found sort of a bloody scene in the bathtub where they were butchering this antelope in the Super 8 bathtub. So think of those things when you go to stay in a hotel room. They called us out. Our game wardens responded, interviewed the suspects there at the hotel that night, and then the suspects agreed to take us out to the scene the next morning and show us where they dumped the animal and skinned it and all that sort of stuff. I did fail to mention at the beginning of this, there are some photos in this presentation that are a little bit bloody. If you're uncomfortable with that, you may want to take a break for a minute during this presentation. But as we go through, there will be an elk case coming up that's got some necropsy photos that if blood makes you a little bit queasy, you may want to step out for those ones. These guys were convicted on it was pled down to a gross misdemeanor rather than the felony, but they also received a year of jail time, which will be suspended pending that 3 years probation of staying out of trouble. The main suspect paid more than $4,500 in civil penalties. That civil penalty is something we pay attention to. With any of our fines, there will be 3 categories of fine. First being the bail. That's the more typical fine. That money comes back to the counties, goes into the education. Next is the civil penalty. That money comes back to us. It's sort of a reimbursement to the state for that animal, and then of course court fees, administrative costs that go along with it. This particular gentleman paid $4,500 in civil penalties. That money goes into our NDOW OGT account, and we use that, to purchase equipment that we may need, whether it be trail cameras, ATVs, that sort of stuff. We're able to take that money and put it back into our program, so we pay attention to that. Also forfeited a rifle, lost hunting, fishing, and trapping privileges for 5 years. I've been talking about these license revocations. That's one of the things that we really use. Some of these crimes vary a lot from one county to the next on how they get prosecuted, how the prosecutor views our cases, how the judge in that county or justice of the peace in that county views our cases. And a lot of these people, if you find somebody $500 or $5,000, that may not really get their attention. But when you take away their hunting license privileges for 3 to 5 years or up to 10 years in some cases, that gets people's attention. I think that's a big deterrent for us. Our next case was an illegal trapping case. This one was a little bit unique because of the time of year. Generally, we work trapping season, November through February. It's a wintertime thing. We're done with most of our fall hunts, and we shift gears into trapping season. I always enjoyed trapping because I find it interesting, and it's a fun time of year to be out hiking around looking at trap sites and spending some time in the hills. This particular case was actually a summertime trapping case, which we'd never worked before, but this was a commercial trapper who had been hired to kill some coyotes for some ranchers. He was an Elko County man, and we invested a ton of time in this case. Any trapping case takes a lot of time and effort simply because to make a visitation case, you have to prove that that person was not there during the 96-hour period. Obviously, that's a fairly large burden of proof, proving that somebody did not look at their trap in a 96-hour period. And of course, you get spread out all over the countryside. This case was going on in Elko County, clear up north, down south, over towards central part of Lander County, all around. So we got spread pretty thin on this, but finally we were able to put it together. This particular trapper was using exposed bait on several places, and then going far beyond his 96-hour visitation time. Because of that, I think that caused a lot of non-target species to die in traps. We found a calf elk dead in a trap and a deer fawn dead in a trap. I think sometimes those non-target species survive okay in the wintertime if it's January and it's 20 degrees, but when it's July and August and it's 90 degrees, I think that caused their demise. This is the elk calf that got caught in a trap. The other time, the factor of the timing of the year is that these calves and fawns are a lot closer to fully grown during traditional trapping season, but in the summer months they were a lot smaller and just didn't have the strength to pull out of the trap, whereas they usually pull out of the trap in January or February. This gentleman received about $1,000 in court fines and paid a $5,000 civil penalty. Again, some jail time that was suspended pending him staying out of trouble. This next case is a Lincoln County case. Our representative from Lincoln County can tell you there's a lot of stuff that goes on in Lincoln County. It seems to be the epicenter for problems that we have, partly due to out-of-state people coming in from Utah, some Vegas people coming up to Lincoln County, some of the Lincoln County locals. For whatever reasons, it seems to be an epicenter for some of our problems. Big trophy animals, and a lot of stuff goes on there. This one was interesting because had some good detective work in it. Essentially, what it boils down to is an elk that was shot during archery season with a rifle. Again, we had a witness that called in and gave us some information on the case, and then our Lincoln County game warden, John Anderson, put it together and went out and did some good investigative work. The other thing you can see on this photo is that they left a lot of the meat. They took the hindquarters and back straps and left the rest. The front shoulders and neck meat and everything else was still there, tenderloins. So there's a picture of our game warden weighing some of the meat that was lost or that was left. This is one of the bags. The total added up to about 18 pounds of meat. Little collateral damage here. You can see I get calls after these cases about how someone needs to buy a new uniform shirt. But it's a cost of doing business that I'm okay with. Some of the forensics here, again, this is where some of these photos will get a little bit bloody if you're not comfortable with that, but looking at the entrance wound, it showed broadhead marks. So, you would think, okay, well, this is legit. He may have shot the elk with a bow after all. Then as we get to taking the animal apart, lift off the scapula, and underneath that scapula, the arrow mark or arrow wound turned into a bullet wound. You can clearly see, the shape of the entrance hole underneath that scapula, and then some severe bullet trauma when the bullet hit the spine, blew up a little bit, broke the thoracic vertebrae in a couple places. Clearly a bullet wound, not arrow trauma. So still a little bit of a mystery at this point why it had a broadhead mark in the entrance hole, but some of the detective work here, we're recovering some bullet fragments from inside the scapula. We do this with a metal detector. Elk especially almost always stop a bullet. Antelope and deer, the bullets pass through a lot, but on an elk you can almost always recover a bullet. So we'll literally just go over it with a metal detector, start getting a hit, try it from a couple different angles, and you can sort of triangulate into the middle of the animal somewhere where that bullet is or where the bullet fragment is. start peeling away layers and sorting through everything, and eventually come up with some bullet fragments. This part of the job is kind of fun when the animal's still fresh. It's not very fun when it's a week or two old, especially in the summertime. We actually send a lot of our people to a wildlife forensics class. There's a graduate student in Montana that puts on a training school about wildlife field forensics that borrows some of the science from human forensics in studying life stages of maggots to count back and determine time of death on the life stages of the maggots that find these carcasses. Not a fun thing to do in August, but it's something that we do. Here's a few of the bullet fragments we recovered from the elk, clearly not killed with an arrow. One of the things we always look for is brass. You'd have to be able to zoom in on this photo. You probably can't see it from the audience, but there's an empty shell casing just in front of that bush, and then in the background is the gut pile from where they gutted the elk, about 250 yards behind. Sometimes it's a needle in a haystack. Sometimes it takes hours to come up with these shell casings, but if you can find it, that's a great piece of the puzzle for us, especially in this case since it was during archery season and we were looking to prove the case that it was shot with a rifle and not an arrow. As some of you from law enforcement can attest, brass, empty shell casings have a lot of forensics evidence on them, whether it be fingerprints, imprints of a bolt face, imprints of a firing pin. On a microscopic level, there's a lot of things a shell casing can tell us about what rifle it was fired out of. Here's a close-up of the shell casing. Again, took a while to find it, but we came up with it, and the pieces of the puzzle started to fall together. One thing we love on these cases is social media. That's been the biggest help for us. We cruise around on Facebook, Instagram, all those places, and sometimes the people give themselves up. In this case, young man took a field photo of him and his elk and clearly had stuck an arrow into the bullet hole. That's why we found the broadhead mark in the entrance wound, but as you can see, the arrow only goes in an inch or two when you're stuffing it in with your hand and not with your bow. So here we are the next week, find the arrow. For whatever reason, they left the arrow. You can still see it there in the foreground with the gut pile in the background. Another thing on this case, which I find odd in a lot of these cases where we're looking through a carcass or looking through a gut pile, people always leave their litter. I've never understood that. You know, I was raised you don't throw your cans out when you're out in the hills, but for some reason, with wildlife criminals, there seems to be a littering component that goes along with it. That's been a head scratcher for me. This case was juvenile, so of course we don't release any names or personal information in a juvenile case, but he was ordered to pay a $500 civil penalty. Generally, fines are fairly low in juvenile cases, but he was ordered to perform 40 hours of community service, retake the hunter education class, and lost his license privileges indefinitely. For juvenile court, indefinitely means until they turn 18. Again, this crime was reported by an eyewitness. It was as a local pioche hunter who heard the gunshot. He was out there archery hunting and knew that there shouldn't be a gunshot going off at that time of year. So I'll shift gears a little bit here into some unsolved cases and then go into some boating stuff. Some of our unsolved cases, again, we reach out to the media on those, just looking for that extra little piece of information we may be lacking. Sometimes we may have a suspect in mind, but we need a little bit more to go knock on their door. One of these we also publicized pretty heavily. This was a bull elk that was poached at night with a spotlight and left to rot, again in Lincoln County. As Corey can attest, Lincoln County seems to be a theme when we're talking about wildlife crime. This was in late August. By sheer luck of things, one of the reasons we found out about this crime was the rancher went out to check his cameras. He actually had some cameras set out to document use of his hay fields, and lo and behold, he sees these two guys driving through his field at 2 o'clock in the morning on his trail camera. Get to looking around and finds the bull elk carcass just outside the alfalfa. This one's being summertime. The state of decay was a little more advanced. If you looked closely here, you could see you're basically digging through a pile of maggots when you get to some of these, and it's not a fun job. You get home and your wife tells you smell bad. But so we're looking for last little bit of information on that case, and we've got several more that we're still working on, as I said, from the fall that may not be wrapped for another 6 months or a year. Sometimes these things take a year to go through the criminal process. There are some statistics and studies out there that show that probably less than 5% of poached big game animals are ever discovered. So when you look at our case numbers and our illegal wildlife reports, that sort of stuff, and you see the numbers, extrapolate that out, the numbers get pretty big when you talk about how many animals could be lost to poaching every year. I'll totally shift gears now into the boating stuff, but first, did you guys have any question on some of those wildlife cases?
Commissioner Young?
One quick one, Tyler. You said earlier in the presentation that your citations and warnings were way down. What was the reason for that, and was that a change in direction or lack of manpower?
Thank you, Commissioner Young. I think it's for several reasons, one of which is some staffing issues. You know, we had, when I first took the job as chief a year and a half ago, we had about 10 vacancies at the field level. So out of 31 field positions, when you have 10 vacancies, you're clearly not accomplishing the mission. We're starting to get caught back up on that. One of my big goals has been hire my first year and a half. We've got 7 new game wardens that are actually in the field working today that weren't here working a year and a half ago. It's a lengthy process by the time you go through all the recruiting, hiring announcement, as you well know. You hire them, send them to an academy. They're gone from 4 to 6 months at an academy. Then when we get them back, we put them through our own NDOW-specific mini academy for 4 to 6 weeks, send them out in the field with a field training officer for another 6 or 8 weeks. And so from the time we start a hiring process to the time they're actually in the field patrolling, sometimes gets close to a year. So it's a cumbersome process, but I haven't, there's really no place to cut corners in that without fully preparing them to be in the field.
Have you been able to mitigate the officers leaving to go through the post academy? You told me quite a few were getting better paying jobs within the state highway patrol and metropolitan police departments and stuff.
To an extent, I think the bleeding has slowed down some. With state government, we've gotten back moving again with merit increases where people get their step increases each year. We're done with doing furloughs, I hope forever. That sort of stuff has helped. I did just see where Metro's about to hire a bunch of laterals, so I hope that doesn't hurt us. So I think we're getting caught up. Some of the other factors in our statistics, like 6 or 8 years ago when the water bodies were up a lot higher. Of course, we write a lot of boating tickets in the summertime for various things. That certainly affects our citation numbers. Northern reservoirs, places we used to maybe work a lot of fishermen, and then the reservoirs are down. That affects our statistics. There's probably several factors at play.
Last question. You made any progress in the reserve program?
We did get a grant to hire one more, or hire, but I guess hire is not the right term when it's a volunteer. But yeah, and then as we talked before, I did get approved for a seasonal warden position down here at Lake Mead, but we couldn't find a retired officer that was interested. So I may reach out to you for some help on that. Somebody that wants
I'll resign this commission tomorrow. Go do it. I told you.
Yeah, I need someone who's current with post and maybe is retired and wants to work about 3 months a year out on the lake. So put the feelers out there. You bet.
Commissioner McNinch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tyler, could you just real quick talk about the wildlife compact agreement, the compact because we're seeing folks are losing their privileges for 5 years, but it's that the significance of it is
That's a great point. I touched on it briefly. We have a license revocation process in statute and in NACs that describes the procedure in which we revoke someone's licenses internally, administratively, in addition to any court sentence. That process got challenged a little bit at the last legislature, but we were able to work through those challenges okay. But one of the key points of that system is that historically, if we revoked someone's hunting license in Nevada, it may not have hurt them as badly because they may go over to Utah or go to Idaho, go to Colorado, go to some other place to hunt during the revocation time here. So 10, 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago now, several state directors got together or law enforcement chiefs got together and came up with what we call the Interstate Wildlife Violator Compact and drew up the legislation for that and got it going. To where now when we revoke somebody, they're also revoked in the member states of the Interstate Compact. I think right now it's getting close to 35 or 40 states that are in that compact, so when we take away someone's hunting privileges, they can't go to the neighboring state and keep hunting. That's been a huge help for us because, wildlife criminals and wildlife doesn't recognize state boundaries, and of course we get a lot of out-of-state people that come and commit wildlife crime here, and we also have people from Nevada that go elsewhere and commit wildlife crime. So that interstate compact helps us a bunch. Thank you. So we'll shift gears a little bit into boating season. We had, like I said, we investigated 9 fatals this year. 5 of those were on Nevada waters, and then the other 4 were on the Arizona side of concurrent jurisdiction waters. First one happened in May. Memorial Day weekend usually kicks off our really busy boating season, especially down here. This was no different. This was a personal watercraft collision in Laughlin. I've touched on this on some of our division activity reports that we have a little bit of a problem with personal watercraft rental companies. In Laughlin specifically, a lot of the rental companies have moved from the Nevada side of the river over to the Arizona side of the river. One of the reasons we think for that is that on the Nevada side, they're required to give jet ski renters a whole safety briefing, a little bit of a lesson on how to operate safely. When they move over to the Arizona side, all they do is sign a piece of paper and they get a jet ski for the day. They get out playing on these things and then run into each other. When 2 jet skis run into each other, there's almost always a broken leg involved, and then of course they escalate from there. Boat versus jet ski never ends well for the jet ski. We try to be strict on those patrols with jet skis spraying each other and stuff. We write a lot of citations for that. Sometimes people don't understand why we do that. Said, hey, we're just out here having fun. We know each other. We're spraying each other with our jet wash, and it's fun. The problem is when one turns the wrong way at the wrong minute, there's a collision, and like I said, at a minimum, you get a broken leg out of it. At a maximum, you end up investigating a fatal boat accident. So we try to be strict on our jet ski reckless operation, but we still get a lot of fatals. I believe these first 2 involve some rental jet skis in Laughlin on the river. First one May 25th, second one June 13th, and then June 21st we shifted up to Lake Mead. A man drowned after leaving his boat to swim at Lake Mead. For whatever Coast Guard rules, those are considered a boat accident, so we end up doing the investigation even when the person may have voluntarily left their boat to go for a swim. Never came back up. July 5th, of course, 4th of July weekend's always another big weekend for us. A lot of crazy stuff happens on 4th of July weekend. Another man that left his boat to swim, probably quite a bit of alcohol involved in this one, never came back up. August 17th, I'll cover this case a little bit just because I picked one to highlight with some photos and some of our investigative work. This is a lady out of Lake Havasu, Arizona. It was her 53rd birthday. Ran her boat into a river taxi dock that had a boat docked there, basically sort of like running into a parked car. Her toxicology results came back with some pretty heavy-duty amounts of narcotics, sedatives, and a BAC of 2.3, almost 3 times our legal limit of 0.08. Here you can see it was a hot rod, V8 kind of a boat that hit the dock and rear-ended the boat that was docked there and then started to sink. So here in this picture, we've got some divers that are doing the recovery of the actual vessel. They go in there and put some inflatable pillows in the boat, start inflating those with a great big compressor, and it lifts the boat up out of the water for us. You can see some of the damage there as it's coming up. We take those back at our Laughlin office. We have a nice indoor facility that's air conditioned because we do so many boat accidents. I think at one point I talked to one of our Laughlin wardens, Brady Phillips, who said he had done 16 boat accident investigations so far this summer, and I think that number may have gone up from there. But so here you can see some of the damage. Most of our people who do a lot of boating, we send them to some boat accident reconstruction schools back east. Of course, boat accidents are a little different than a highway accident. There are no skid marks to measure on pavement, and your vehicles start moving as soon as the accident's over. They drift apart, especially on the river. Where we look for skid marks is on the vessel itself, transfer marks from one vessel to another. There's a lot of forensics work that can go into one of these fatal boat accidents. Some of these reports can be, 1.5 inches thick of investigative stuff and photos and supplemental reports, especially in a fatal, because anytime there's a fatality, there's going to be a case that goes on for years with civil cases and lawsuits and given depositions and that sort of stuff. So we try to investigate these fatal accidents to the nth degree. Some of the Arizona side accidents that we investigated, there was another 4 over there. As I said, we do that because of the concurrent jurisdiction. Arizona Game and Fish doesn't have a lot of staff in that part of the state, so we end up investigating a lot of those accidents on the Arizona side, partly because we're first on scene and partly just because our people, our Southern Region game wardens, do enough of this that they're considered the subject matter experts on boat accidents, and they're really good at investigating them. A couple of these on the Arizona side were a little bit tough this year. We had one on Lake Mojave in which a gentleman and his son were swimming in the water. Needed the wife to come over and pick him up. So he waved at his wife, said, "Come on, back the boat up to me." She wasn't familiar with how to operate the boat. He was behind the boat. She put it in reverse, gunned the throttle a little bit, sucked her husband into the prop, and those accidents never turn out well. We end up bringing divers in to pick up the pieces in those, and there were a lot of pieces in this one. I'll spare you the photos on that. The next one was on the Virgin Basin of Lake Mead, in which this is a big open basin. If you're familiar with the lake, that's probably the biggest basin on the lake. Had some callers call in, said, "Hey, there's a boat adrift out here, and nobody seems to be around. It's not near the shore. It may have drifted off from shore. Somebody may have come from someone's beach camp, or somebody may have fallen in. We're not sure." Send a boat out there, and what we found when we got to the boat, if you can see on the red arrow there, the throttle was in the full forward position, and the kill switch was still in the boat. Clearly not something that drifted away from a beach camp. When you find a bass boat that's adrift in the middle of a lake and the throttle's in the full forward position and it's not running, that's a bad sign. So we started a hasty search between ourselves and National Park Service. Got a couple helicopters, 2 helicopters out of Vegas and I think 1 from Nellis Air Force Base. Did the initial hasty search of the beach around the area. Meanwhile, got the boat off the lake, got it back to a warehouse, started looking at it. One of the first things we realized is that, I don't know if you can see it in the picture here, but it's a photo of the steering rods that turn the engine from side to side. It's a hydraulic system that moves that engine. On the other side, that nut there that's in the foreground of this photo had come off. So when the engine turns one way, the steering comes out of the engine parts, and basically you lose all steering and the engine can flop violently from left to right. So our initial search here, this is an overhead view of the lake, and of course there at the center in that purple dot was where the boat was found. Prevailing winds were coming out of the south that day, so you make a triangle to the north of where you start looking for a person. At this time it was still considered a search and rescue. We didn't know that it was going to be a body recovery necessarily. The red lines are where the helicopter tracked, looked in the shorelines to see if a person had made it to shore. But it was just too big of an area. We felt like it was a needle in a haystack at that point, and we were chasing our tail. Thankfully, investigators looking at the boat realized there was an onboard GPS. It was a Hummingbird, and the track feature was turned on. That was a huge celebration for us, big clue. So we, not wanting to mess up any of the forensic evidence, we called Hummingbird, got specific instructions from them on how to download all the track data, and we were able to come up with this. Obviously, that's more than just one day's worth of fishing, so there were probably, his last 4 or 5 fishing outings were stored on this Hummingbird GPS. Clean that up a little bit, start getting to the more recent ones, and you end up with that day's track of when the incident happened. Launched at Colville Bay, came through the Narrows, got out into the Virgin Basin, and then it gets a little odd from there, where his eastward progress stops, all of a sudden turns south, and then the boat hooks back up, ends up going north. We were a little bit confused by that. Out in the field, took a cell phone photo of the GPS screen. This is before downloading all the stuff from Hummingbird. Sent that back to the Park Service's IT people, and they overlaid the cell phone photo of the screen over a Google Earth image of the lake, and made the islands and coves match up to where we got a little bit better idea of where the boat's track went strangely, or went awry. I tried the laser pointer earlier and it doesn't show up on the TV screen, but if you were to zoom in on that left photo, you can see the boat's course gets really erratic at one point. And when we got it back to the office and really zoomed in, you could see the boat's course gets really erratic. So it's coming from the left there into your screen, coming from the west, makes a slight turn to the south, and then a really hard turn to the south. We surmised that that's the point where the steering broke, ejected the operator from the boat, and the boat headed south at a high rate of speed without the operator in it. So we're starting to narrow down our search for where this body might be. When the boat gets down there south, the engine flopped to one side, we think, and the boat started spinning circles. So that jagged line going out to the east there is the boat literally doing 360s across the Virgin Basin. Oddly, nobody noticed this and called us on that. It was mid-morning when this was happening, and nobody saw that boat spinning circles out there, but at that point it didn't matter because the body was in the water back where this boat took a hard southward turn. So We felt confident that the person left the boat where the line makes a hard southward turn, but that's deep water there, 250, 300 feet of water, not an easy place to search for somebody. So we called a company in Vegas that has an ROV, remote operated vehicle, I think it is, basically on a big camera on a lanyard, send it down, and with some of their sonar stuff, they found this image in the lower right-hand corner of your screen there in 277 feet of water, what they felt was the body. They were actually able to guide their ROV around him and hook him and pull him up. I blurred out part of this picture just so you're not looking at a dead body on your screen, but this is what they see in their screen of what the ROV is seeing in 277 feet of water. That was a huge help for us. Contracting that company saved us a lot of work, and really a big help for the family, because of course all they know is that their husband and father is missing and don't know where. So calling that ROV company, they found him for us in a very quick time, whereas without that, we would have had to maybe wait weeks, or if ever he popped back up. As it turned out, our guess was spot on, where the boat made the hard southward turns where we started searching, and in a linear line, the body was recovered 58 feet from that spot where we thought the boat turned south. So nailed that one. So in conclusion, like I said, we've had some drought issues, on waterways where some of our boating has slowed down up north, some of our fishing has slowed down, but on the wildlife end of things, we're as busy as ever. With elk tag numbers going up and up and up, as elk numbers grow and grow, that really increases our caseload. More and more people out in the field year round. Seems like it used to be. There was a big off season out in the hills where we didn't see anyone out and about for several months at a time. Now it seems to be year round. There are people out scouting, looking around, snowmobiling, riding ATVs, trapping, shed hunting. It's a 12-month deal out in the hills now, so we're as busy as ever. Our accident numbers were just as high as ever on the waterways, and it was, although our stats are down as far as citations and cases, our boat accident numbers stayed high. We had 17 boat accidents on the Colorado River down in Laughlin, 26 on Lake Mead. Little shout out to National Park Service. They take some of those accidents for us. They're a big help on Lake Mead. We had 2 on Mojave and 1 on Lake Tahoe. One on Lake Tahoe was another jet ski versus jet ski incident, doing zigzags around each other and spraying each other, and one jet ski rode up over the hood of the second jet ski, collided with a man's head, and he was in ICU for several days. We thought that one may turn into a fatal, but thankfully he made it through. In addition to the 9 fatalities, our accident investigations involved 71 vessels and 23 major injuries. That's it for my wrap-up. Like I said, it's kind of a sampling of cases. There are hundreds of others, but I grabbed a few that just had some interesting notes on them to show you guys who we are and what we do.
Questions, Commissioner Young?
Going back to the lake stuff, Tyler, how does the funding break down? I know that the Park Service has fee collection booths and started charging people to go to the lake a few years ago. Why is the state doing it when isn't it a national recreation area? And aren't they collecting fees for those types of services, or do they reimburse you?
Yeah, Liz may jump in here as she can, because I don't fully grasp all of our finances yet, but as I understand it, we don't get any of that National Park Service fee booth money. Our boating safety money comes primarily from Coast Guard grants in the form of motorboat fuel tax. If you're out at the lake and you gas up your boat at one of the lake docks, there's a tax on that ends up coming back to us. Boat registrations, when you pay $20 or $40 to register your boat, some of that money comes back into our boating safety program. So there's a combination of state money and federal money there that combines into our boating program. But yeah, actually none of that fee booth money goes into boating for us. Is that fairly accurate, Liz?
Additional questions for Chief Turnipseed? Commissioner Hubbs?
Chief Turnipseed, it's really not a question. I just wanted to say I'm really impressed with all of the work that you showed your sampling today. I really had no idea how in-depth your work might be at times, especially uncovering that body in Lake Mead and relieving the family of that. All the work that was involved was very impressive. But I also wanted to say, I think in terms of littering, that's not so surprising to me. I'm thinking if there's a blatant disregard of law, one would litter as well if they're poaching. So I would just use it as evidence in the future. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. I appreciate your comments. Like I said, I'm really proud of the work we do. I've been doing this for about 18 years and spent 17 of that in the field. And you know, there are days when, some days there are days in the office when I wish I was knee deep in elk maggots.
Careful what you wish for. Additional questions? Commissioner Johnston?
Just a comment, I just want to thank the Chief Game Warden, all the game wardens of the state. I know you have a very difficult job to do, and I know all the ethical and responsible sportsmen appreciate it when you're able to solve wildlife crimes and get the convictions that you do, because those criminals do not portray hunters in a good light. And I'll also note that I was checked the opening weekend of the chucker season when I saw the game warden coming up to our camp, and it was a very pleasant professional experience, and that's a good way for people to be introduced to the department out in the field, and also a good lesson for the young children that were in our camp with us, that you never know when the game warden's going to arrive. And the age of our kids is like, did we do something wrong? It's like, no, and we have nothing to worry about. So but I just wanted to make that comment and thank you for all the work that you and your entire staff do on behalf of wildlife in the state.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. I really appreciate that comment, and I guess I would highlight on that fact, you know, here we are grabbing a few of the cases that we've worked on over the year, and as I said, we try to celebrate when we do catch someone and show that example, but that's probably not the way to word it, you know, celebrating that we've got someone doing wrong. The ones that we really enjoy are that, you know, when we pull into a camp and there's a 12-year-old on his first hunt or her first hunt. We mostly got into this career, most of our people get into this career because we love the outdoors, hunting, fishing, camping, boating, all that sort of stuff. You know, people get into this career because they love the stuff we do. The vast majority of the people we talk to every day have done nothing wrong. You know, we chat with them about where the deer might be, we check their licenses, check their gun, make sure they're safe. We did have an unfortunate fatal hunting accident in O'Neill Basin in Area 7 this year. We touched on that earlier in one of the activity reports, but we try to be strict on the safety regulations. We try to be strict on the fair chase type regulations, but as I said, somewhere far north of 90% of the people we talk to are great sportsmen out recreating and having a good time and have done nothing wrong, and we try to keep that in mind in our patrols, you know, that you know, it's the 1 or 2% of the people that we're looking for. Especially in the small towns, I really encourage our new wardens to be a member of their community, you know, volunteer for your Chucker Foundation chapter or play softball or coach Little League or whatever, just because I want our officers to be known as a member of that community, and you know, that gains us a lot of miles when somebody does see something and says, you know, picks up the phone and says, hey Tyler, you know, I saw this yesterday when I was out in Willow Creek Canyon and I think you may want to look at it. That's big for us. We got to be a member of those communities to function.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Morai?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to point out an incident that happened up in our area that portrays the dedication that a lot of not only just the wardens, but and our personnel in general, is we had a warden that showed up at our gate on Thanksgiving Day because he was conducting an investigation up there in that area. And so I think as we go along throughout the year, we don't think about how much dedication it takes and a lot of the extra time that is spent on the work that you guys do. So I just want to let you know that I appreciate it and it doesn't go unnoticed.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Commissioner Morai. And I think about that now that I've shifted more into an office role. You know, sometimes I'll get a call at 8 o'clock at night from one of the field officers who, you know, spent the day chained up in 6 inches of slush and snow, or yeah, in August when it's 120 out at the lake and they're out there wearing a Kevlar vest and a 20-pound gun belt. You know, I appreciate all that goes into it, and I'm glad that other people recognize it too. Thank you.
Anything else? Other than I would echo those same comments. Director Wasley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to thank Tyler not only for the presentation today, but for all his efforts and the efforts of his staff. And I mean, to say anything would be redundant, repetitive, what's been said here, but truly appreciative, and there's a whole lot of effort that shouldn't go unrecognized, although it may be unnoticed. It shouldn't be unrecognized. And the challenges with the investigations, some of what we're exposing some of these young kids to, fresh out of the academy, on some of these fatalities, truly unfortunate incidences, and the dedication of these individuals just should be recognized, and I appreciate the comments of the commission. I'd also like to say we saw several of these cases that came to light due to calls to the Operation Game Thief hotline, and just like to put that out to the broader audience here today, is that we really do rely heavily on those calls, and so encourage people to use that. It's an invaluable tool, and as I reported yesterday, we just paid out $1,600 in reward money to 4 different individuals, $1,600 total across those 4 individuals for tips received that led to successful prosecution. I'd also like to add just a little bit of information on the Interstate Wildlife Violators Compact. It was in 1985 that Nevada and Colorado developed the first interstate compact, and it was commissioners and chief game wardens from those states that developed that. And so this goes to some of the points we were making yesterday, and the value of the association of Fish and Wildlife agencies and regional associations, because oftentimes it's ideas that are spawned by commissioners interacting with commissioners from other states. And so Nevada had a key role in the initial compact, which was just with Colorado in 1985. And today there's 44 states involved in that, and there are only 6 who aren't part of that Wildlife Violators Compact: New Jersey, Delaware, Massachusetts, Hawaii, Washington, D.C., and Nebraska. So it is almost a complete 50-state compact. And lastly, I would just like to put out to the commission, as well as the county advisory boards or interested publics, that going forward with this item, not only could we make a law enforcement update an annual function for the commission and interested attendees, but as we move around the state, if there are other projects or programs that you all would like to have reports on, please let us know so that we can put something together. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Drew, Commissioners, and Director Wasley. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Chief Turnipseed. With that, we'll close agenda item 17.